Last video, I commented on how Voyager ended up becoming the most authentic Star Trek series for me because of how much I took it in during those formative years from ages 11 to 13 or so. Back then, as a preteen, it was exciting. Now, as an adult, I find it more so intriguing because of all of its thought-provoking content, much like I do with the rest of Star Trek. I thought it'd be fun to kind of draw out that point by going through some of the most unforgettable, I'll call them grown-up moments of Voyager. This is those parts that stand out in my personal memory from watching them as an adult versus those unforgettable kid moments, the parts that I loved the most as a kid. By and large, the unforgettable grown-up moments are going to be things that didn't mean a whole lot to me as a kid, didn't stand out that much. Whereas a lot of the time, these kid moments were ones that got my focus when I was a kid, but they don't nearly so much grab my attention now as an adult. And sometimes I even find them boring because they're drilled into my head so much, and also because when I watched them as a kid, I actually did understand them with all their implications. So there's nothing new for me to find as an adult. And so I put together a list. 7 episodes that came to my mind as I put this together here were Faces from Season 1, Hope and Fear, Persistence of Vision, The Thaw, Mortal Coil, Emanations, and Barge of the Dead. So these are organized by the order in which they came to my mind, and maybe I would have a different list if I went through and combed through the series to try to find stuff. But it's kind of a subjective list, and the point is that these are themes that I found compelling as an adult. They were less meaningful when I was a kid. And then for my other list, the unforgettable kid moments, which I'll go through next. This is going to be a series of videos. So this list is a little longer, but I'll be spending less time on each one. Definitely my old favorite from all of my childhood watching Voyager has got to be Future's End, without question. Followed by, which I kind of blend together as one, all the two-parters, all the exciting two-parters. Workforce, The Killing Game, Scorpion, Unimatrix Zero, and Endgame. And then 3 episodes that stand out in my memory as uniquely fun. These are Macrocosm, Worst Case Scenario, and Juggernaut. And like with the other list, this one's based on what came to my mind while I was putting it together. The first episode in my list is Faces, which is probably the episode I've found most impactful as an adult. This is the episode where B'Elanna is captured by the Vidians and she's split into her Klingon half and her human half. I think it's so easy to get distracted by topics like, let's say, cloning or the scientific impossibility of the kind of splitting that they did there. But I don't think that the episode has anything to do with cloning or with the science of splitting a person. I see the science of it as a literary device to tell an allegorical story about the two warring parts of oneself, the experience of inner conflict that most of us can relate to in some way. In a way, the story is a riff off of the original series episode called The Enemy Within. It's the episode where Kirk is split into the good Kirk and into the more violent, selfish Kirk, who they refer to as evil. Or I think Spock, or maybe somebody else as well, they use that word. And the conclusion of the episode is that in the end, we need both sides of ourselves. We need, on the one hand, our docile, calm, peace-loving side of ourselves, as well as our more impulsive, strong-willed, determined self. And we need both of these sides to be integrated in order to be a healthy, functional person. Faces in Voyager is a more psychologically interesting, in my opinion, more psychologically interesting, more artistically compelling take on the same theme. So in Faces, the conflict it's not like you might think at first, it's not between B'Elanna and the Vidians, like it seems. As I see it, that's a distraction. The real conflict is the inner conflict of B'Elanna between her violent and impulsive self, the Klingon side, and her emotionally vulnerable but self-controlled and intelligent side, the human half. I don't think the high point of the tension of the episode, I don't think it's primarily where B'Elanna's fighting the Vidians, but rather I think the high point of the tension is when B'Elanna argues with herself about how much she hates herself. maybe I wouldn't love the episode so much if the performance wasn't so compelling. But as it is, it definitely became an unforgettable grown-up moment, we'll say, for me. As a kid, when I watched it as a kid, I saw very little in the episode beyond one more conflict with the Vidians. I mean, Vidians are kind of cool, but as an adult, the Vidians became almost invisible to me. One of the other reasons this story is so compelling is the portrayal of these two so diverse, so well portrayed B'Elanna characters. They're so compelling and recognizable as distinct characters, and yet at the same time, you can't miss the fact that every interaction they have is this compelling, extended, dramatized self-talk that really belongs to one character. It's kind of funny. I remember commenting to my sister back when I was 11 or 12. I remember commenting that human B'Elanna is so much prettier than the normal one. And my sister disagreed strongly. She thought B'Elanna looks so much better with forehead ridges. So I've kind of been musing about that ever since. You know, many of us can relate to the feeling of hate for a part of our own self. A part of our own self which we may wish we could cut out with a knife and throw in a corner to rot. Maybe for some of us, watching the two versions of B'Elanna make peace with one another becomes just an unforgettable image. And maybe for some of us, it could become just the very edge of learning to take a cue from them and begin to make peace with two parts within oneself. Because the fact is, many of us have those two parts. Many of us have one part of us that tends to crumble when the going gets tough, to quote from a different Voyager episode spoken about another Voyager character. Some of us have a part of us that we want to yell that at. And we have another part that stupidly pushes and fights when it's not the time to fight. Many of us have one side of us that is emotionally vulnerable and wide-eyed with feeling, like the human B'Elanna, and another side of us that's disgusted with the weakness and with the inability to stand on your own 2 feet. But the hatred can't bring either side the peace that she seeks. So that's a little bit about Faces and how it turned out to be one of the unforgettable adult moments for me. Next, I'll be talking about Hope and Fear and how that became a notable experience for me as well in its own way.